Join the conversation.
This is CapeTalk. It is time to wander the world, and today we are doing some armchair travel to Belgium. And our guide on this journey is going to be a very familiar voice to you. My former colleague Leanne de Bassompierre recently returned to South Africa. She's just been appointed business editor for the Africa Report. Congratulations, Leanne, and welcome home. It's great to see you back on SA soil.
Thank you so much, Pippa. It's really great to be back and to be back on CapeTalk. I've been listening for the past couple of months, and it just feels like so warm and fuzzy, all the familiar voices.
Lovely.
And I'm very happy to be back.
Well, we're so happy to have you with us today because the minute I saw Taste of Belgium was happening this weekend, I said to my producer, we need to talk about travel to Belgium. And we are going to tell you all about Taste of Belgium at the end of the interview. But then I said, we know exactly who we need to get in as a guest for this segment because the clue is in her surname. Leanne, you're married to a Belgian national and your boys are Belgian South African citizens. So you spend quite a bit of time there, don't you?
We do spend lots of time. So for the past 20 years, even before we started having kids, we've spent our summers there, and thanks to global warming, the summers are becoming hotter and hotter every day. I remember first going to Belgium about 20 years ago in the summer, and I was like, this is not summer, it is raining.
This doesn't count.
All the time. And they say this in Belgium, they said, if you, especially about Brussels, the capital, they say if it's not raining, it's either just rained or it's about to rain. And I think in recent years, we have to kind of relook that because it's not been my experience the last few summers. I feel like you either get a hot July or a hot August, but not both. But you get some hot weather, which has been quite nice. And so our summers are primarily spent in the Ardennes region, which is a very beautiful part of Belgium. And I think often overlooked for travelers outside of Europe. So European travelers, they will go to that region. They love hiking, and on the Meuse River, there's so much to do. Something that I like to do is doing cycling along the river, and you've got campsites that you've got peppered across the river, and you've also got the abbeys where you still have the microbreweries, and you have some monks that are still producing that beer. And so you can visit the abbey, you can have a camping trip, you can get some exercise with the cycling, and it's quite a robust, active vacation that you can have. So that's what we spend a lot of our summer doing. My boys then spend another 10 days at Scout Camp, and that's actually taken us across Belgium because it's, especially when they're in the younger ages, so the Cub Scouts, they will be in Bruges or in Ghent or in other small towns in Belgium, and that's gotten us to travel actually. So when we've gone to Bruges, which is really a must-see little town, it is, they say, you know, it's got the little canals that you have in Amsterdam, so taking little boats and doing tours of the canal. Of course, there's chocolate to be eaten and lots of lace actually. That's what Bruges is very well known. Ghent is another small town like that, but it's got a more student feel. So if you maybe travel on a budget, Ghent is somewhere that you could get very expensive things, but also very cheap options in terms of accommodation, in terms of things to do, in terms of sites. But of course, Belgium is known for its chocolates, its beer, and its Tintin. And those are the things that you will see in all the different parts of Belgium that you go to, even though it's a country that is very small country, but you have 3 distinct languages in the country. You have very different cultures also, because you'll see in the Wallonia region, which is the French-speaking region, which is in the Ardennes that I was speaking about earlier. You will have, as I said, it's very beautiful in nature, but it's French-speaking and very different. Whereas in the Flemish-speaking, which is the language that's very close to Dutch and even very similar to Afrikaans, it's funny because my father speaks Afrikaans to my father-in-law, and my father-in-law speaks Flemish back to him.
And they understand each other.
And they understand each other.
That's amazing.
So, yes, it is that similar.
Okay.
Even though you sometimes think, can I understand? You can understand better than what you can actually speak, but definitely written Flemish you can understand.
To read, okay. So Flemish, French, is the third one German? Or?
German.
Yeah,
it's a very, very small percentage in the east of the country, and mostly in rural part of Belgium, but it is a population. It is the third official language.
Okay. Now, let's talk about getting there, the basics. Can you fly direct from Cape Town to Brussels, or does one have to go sort of via somewhere else in Europe?
There are sometimes seasonal flights between South Africa and Belgium, because there is a very huge population of Belgians in South Africa,
Really?
actually.
Okay.
I mean, some years ago, the figure that I had was something like 26,000 Belgians at the time. And it's mainly Belgians that had left Congo and then had come, they were too African to go back to Belgium, and South Africa was a good common ground for them to come to.
That's interesting. Hence the appeal of the Taste of Belgium event happening at the residence this weekend,
which
and
is
why it's so popular.
Exactly, and of course the fantastic beer that you get and all the other treats. So Belgium is a country, as I said, of beer, and there are 1,500 different beers that you can have. So, of course, you can go to the Stella Artois Museum and have the Stella Artois experience, which I think most people, if they know Belgian beer, they think of Stella Artois. But actually, Belgium is really well known for its microbreweries and its specialty beers.
Okay.
My favorite, I'm not really a beer drinker, to be honest, but I love a beer called Kriek, and it's a cherry beer, and it's just delicious.
I was going to say, I associate fruit beers with Belgian, and I'd never encountered the concept before going to a Belgian event where somebody, they gave me, I think, a pear flavored beer.
Yes,
and it was so out there in flavor.
Cherry, it is. Okay. I mean, you can't have too many because it's just
very heavy,
sweet, but it is delicious. And, you think, it's sweet and it's not going to do anything, but that goes to your head at some point.
Famous last words.
In fact, some beers, have such a high alcohol content, like 27, 28%, that you think, it's just a couple of beers that I'm drinking. And then, it very quickly can go to your head.
Okay, so you're not going to drive after those. On that note, public transport, if you're visiting as an outsider without a car, is there public transport readily available? How do people get around?
I think public transport is readily available, but Brussels, actually, I find, compared to other European cities, people have cars and people get around with their cars. Even though public transport is very readily available, in the capital, you can get around in tram, you can get around in very expensive Belgian taxis, which are all Mercedes-Benz, by the way.
Oh my gosh,
very interestingly. Uber is there, there is the metro. But as I said, people do get around mostly in their cars, I find, which is very different compared to other cities. In fact, my brother-in-law works in mobility, and so his project that he's been doing is trying to connect the city a bit better in terms of people coming from the metro and then linking to the other modes of public transport in the city.
So you're not going to see what you see just across the road in Amsterdam, not far away, bicycles everywhere, and people on foot?
You do see a lot of that. I think there's really been a huge drive to do a lot more on bicycle, especially in Brussels. You also see that in Antwerp, which is the diamond capital of the world. And I must say, if you are going to make it to Antwerp, they have the world's best chocolate museum. And I visited it 2 years ago for the first time. And because I've done a lot of work in cocoa, having lived in Côte d'Ivoire, which is the world's number one cocoa producer, it was beautiful in the way that yes, Belgium is known for chocolate, but they also assume that chocolate does not come from Belgium. So they've refined the process of making chocolate. So taking the raw beans and then turning it into finished products in the end. So they really take you through that whole journey from bean to bar and what that means. So it's a beautiful experience. And so I would there are other smaller museums in Brussels, in Ghent, in Bruges, because it's such a chocolate obsessed country and well known for its chocolate, but that particular one I think is well worth visiting.
In Antwerp. Okay, thanks for the tip. Trout, thank you, writing in to say one of my favorite places to be. It is so beautiful to ride your bike through Flanders, is his comment. So there we go, echoing that cycling culture is part of the deal over there.
So you see it more in Flanders because it's flatter, so it's like the Netherlands, and you see it, I think, less in Wallonia.
Okay. Now, Leanne, obviously an old country with a very long and rich history and lots of medieval sites, and I think 3,000 castles, somebody told me.
Exactly. It's the country in the world with the highest number of castles, highest density of castles. And so I find that very interesting because every small little town has their little castle and their medieval castle. And actually once a year, the private owners of those castles, they actually have to make the property available for the public to see.
Okay.
So it would be on the equivalent of Heritage Day where they have to make this, publicly open. It's part of owning that and part of the heritage.
Amazing.
Of the country.
So it's not lost to the public, even though it's in private hands. That's fantastic.
Exactly.
Okay. Just for anybody who's coming in midway to this conversation, you recognize the voice, of course. It belongs to Leanne de Bassompierre, previously part of the CapeTalk team and just returned to South Africa after many years traveling the world. She is married to a Belgian national. Her children are South African Belgian citizens, and they travel obviously very often to Belgium to see friends and family and to visit homes. So she's had a lot of experience of going there as a South African visitor on a South African passport, although it must probably by now a Belgian passport.
No,
guess.
Actually,
not.
nearly 18 years married and
no.
still no Belgian passport.
Oy.
But I
Okay.
have residence for Belgium, so it is easy for me to travel.
Okay, so you
in
don't
and
have to
out
get a
of the
visa.
country. No, I don't have to get a visa, but I do have a residence card, so I
Okay.
can travel very easily in and out of the country. Of course, Belgium is in the Schengen country, so if you have a Schengen visa, you can easily enter Belgium on that visa. If you are applying for a Schengen visa, then you have, and Belgium is your first stop, you have to go to the Belgian embassy
Okay, good to know.
apply for
To
that
apply for it
visa.
at the embassy itself.
No, it's obviously
okay.
VFS, the different processes that you have now. But I think, there are very many options of going to Belgium. I said earlier that, seasonally they sometimes have direct flights between Belgium and South Africa, but all the big companies that fly into Cape Town they have flights. So we are going in a month's time, and we're taking Turkish Airlines via Istanbul.
Okay.
I found that seemed to be the shortest layover especially when you're traveling with kids.
Yeah, big factor. Yeah, and the cost of flights to Europe being what it is.
Exactly.
To think about. Yeah.
And so, it depends when you buy. If you're buying 45 days minimum in advance, and all these great, banking apps now that you can buy it directly through the bank and get the discounts. I'm taking advantage of that because they really are very interesting, and I'm not being paid to say that. But there are many options now, I think, and that's what's great for South Africans, that you don't have to think, I can't travel because everything is so expensive.
It's 24,000 Rand return ticket kind of thing. You can, if you do your homework, find something
Exactly.
a little bit more.
So we paid in the region of 12,000 Rand for
Okay.
our flights for the end of the year, which we obviously bought in advance and with points and with
all of that, but
and discounts, etc. But that is reasonable.
That's a very reasonable
especially
figure,
when you are a family of 5.
Something to consider. My gosh, okay. At least they're older kids to travel with now. I can't imagine doing it in the younger days, Leanne. I want to pause for a second and talk about some of these sort of historical sites to visit. And you've, obviously, Brussels being the capital, I know they've got the famous square that is one of the most famous, the Grand Place, I think it's called.
La Grand Place. It's beautiful. And every second year they have what they call tapis de fleurs. So it's a
carpet of flowers.
A carpet of flowers, and it's so beautiful. And so if you are planning a trip to Belgium, to try to do it around that time, it is just incredible to see, really beautiful. The square itself is very interesting because you have all these gilded buildings around, from the former different trades that people had. So you have the Tailors Guild, and you have all these, the Banking Guild, and you have all these different buildings. Belgium is also, Brussels specifically, is also known for its Art Nouveau buildings.
Okay,
and so you can do walking tours that takes you around the square and gives you very interesting perspective of what to see. So you're not just going, okay, Grand Place, okay, what's next?
Beautiful building, but what is it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then around, so there are lots of restaurants, obviously, on the square, like any of the squares in Europe, but they're so expensive. So I would suggest going, 2 or 3 streets away and then finding the very traditional brasserie where you have moule frites, which is the mussels that you absolutely have to have, and fries. And I must say, after 20 years, I do have my fries with mayonnaise, and it's delicious.
You finally knuckled down and given up on the tomato sauce. I love it. Moule frites, I know, one of the dishes on the menu at the Taste of Belgium event this coming weekend. By the way, so if you've never had it, here's your opportunity to go and try something different.
It's so good.
It's so good. It's so good. I've never been, but the more I research for this segment, Leanne, the more I'm thinking that trip I was thinking of doing to Paris next year might have to do a side expedition into Belgium, because of course it's right there.
It's right.
Accessibility.
It's an hour 20 by train. You can drive it. It's a lot longer to drive. We drove it last summer because we had our nanny from India where we were previously, and she was like, I really want to. We took her to Belgium for the summer, and she really only wanted to see the Eiffel Tower. So we drove to Paris, and it's actually a 4-hour drive as opposed to a 1 hour 20 train ride. Yes,
Okay, so definitely something to consider. Now, of course, you've heard us mention Flanders several times, and for many people, that immediately sums up memories of wartime and battle sites and cemeteries. And I'm mindful of the fact that we're doing this interview on Armistice Day, which is the day marking the signing of the armistice that ended World War I this day in 1918. So before we talk about the battle sites, I thought let's just take a moment to reflect on that fact and to remember the millions and millions of lives that were lost in this part of the world between the two world wars. And a beautiful way to do that is to listen to the famous poem by John McCrae called In Flanders Fields. And we're playing you a version here read by the late Sir John Gielgud.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
That voice still gives me goosebumps all these years after he left us. The poem, of course, written by Canadian John McCrae, read there by the late Sir John Gielgud. Leanne, I mean, obviously, many sites of huge battles of both World War I and World War II, but not just the world wars. There's another very significant battle further back in history that has its sites in Belgium.
At the time, but Waterloo was where Napoleon was famously defeated, and we visited the battlefield and the museum that accompanies it with the kids when they were quite young, and we visited it even when they were older, and they absolutely were intrigued by it. It was really didactic and interesting for them to see or to experience part of history. I mean, they're very well-traveled children and they've seen lots of historical monuments, but it was still very interesting for them to see. So if you are going with your kids, I would suggest that you do that. And it's a day trip from Brussels. And if you want to, and sometimes when we travel with the kids, I'm sure you did the same when your kids were younger, but try to find exciting things that are not travel, like museums but there's a great water park and amusement park very close to that battlefield. So we sometimes do both. And they've got the most amazing zoo, actually, in Belgium called Paris des Arts. It's the most beautiful zoo in all of Belgium. And I'm not a zoo person, but this particular one is done so fantastically. We've been a few times, and it's just really something to put on the list of things to see and do, especially if you're going with children.
Absolutely. I mean, there's only so much that children can take of monuments and battle sites and that before they lose focus. So that's a great idea to distract them. David calling in asking, is the atomium still there in Brussels? That's the very futuristic sort of balls hanging on spikes. It looks a little bit like a jumping jack. Tell us more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was, it still is there, and right next to it, actually. So what you can do, you can get a ticket for both the Atomium and Mini Europe, which is very interesting. So it's basically kind of a walking maze of Europe and all the different sites that you see in Europe. And it's in a venue just next door. It's outside. And so if you go to the Atomium, you can do Mini Europe as well.
Okay.
And it's just outside of Brussels. You can take the metro, you can take a taxi, you can take the bus.
Okay. So for those who have no idea what that is, it's very hard to describe. It's a silver, very modern looking building. My producer's giving me the official description is that it is a landmark modernist building constructed as the centerpiece of the 1958 Brussels World's Fair. Sort of enormous.
But you can actually, you can see beautiful views from inside.
Okay.
So it's not just something that you look at, but you can have lunch inside. Yes, you can go inside, exactly.
I'm glad you mentioned it.
And you
David.
see it exactly, I mean, when you leave the airport in Brussels, Zaventem Airport, you can actually see it on the road from the airport. But it is a little bit away outside of the city.
Okay. Somebody writing in to say, I can't believe you haven't mentioned the famous statue of Mannequin Piss.
Of course, we were going to get there. And
so tell us, okay, so for those who can't picture it, it's a statue of a little boy having a wee. And I've alternately heard people describe it as the biggest letdown of their trip and the most exciting thing to see.
And you can walk past there. So it's just off La Grande Place.
Yeah.
And you can walk past there any time of the year. It can be like so rainy and so cold, but there will be crowds around this little character called Mannequin Peace. And what's interesting, I find, is that depending on what day of the year it is, he's dressed up.
Okay.
And they've marked, for example, they did 18th of July, Madiba's birthday a few years ago, where he was dressed with South African colors. And so I think that that's quite interesting. So it depends what's happening in the world, what's happening on that particular day. But he's got a whole wardrobe. And apparently you can also visit the museum and see these different wardrobes that Mannequin Peace has as well.
Okay.
I haven't, but I believe you can.
Okay, so if you want to have the absolutely quintessential Belgian tourist experience, Leanne, you've got to go inside the Atomium. You've got to go and visit Mannequin Peace, whatever he is wearing that day. You've got to eat some mule frites with a little side order of chocolate afterwards.
And mayonnaise.
A beer.
And a beer.
Mayonnaise with the chips, of course. You've got to listen to some Jacques Brel in the background.
Of course.
Pick up a Smurfs or Tintin comic on the way out. Is there anything we've left out? Maybe a lesser-known attraction that you'd like to flag as a favorite?
Well, as I said to you, for nature lovers, I like the parts outside of Brussels where you can cycle, where you can do lots of walks, where you can visit the abbeys outside of Brussels. And so instead of just doing the museum tour of Stella Artois, for example, visiting an abbey, and you see a lot of they call it Trappist beer, so it's like local
Trappist monks, yes.
Trappist monks that have made it. And one of the famous ones, and you actually find that beer called Maritsu.
Yep.
It's actually the boarding school that my husband went to, and they still do tours of the abbey. It's still run as a boarding school, and I find it really very beautiful, that region. As I said, going to Antwerp, going to Bruges, those you can do in day trips, but it is worth spending a night and just soaking up some of that culture.
Yeah.
Also, it's summer when you have such long days and you can be basically strolling the streets and the canals till 10, 11 o'clock at night. So you can, if you're going in the summertime, really prolong your stay with that.
I feel like you've taken us there on a guided tour already. Leanne de Bassompierre, such a pleasure, firstly, to have you back in the country, but thank you so much for being our guide on One of the World this afternoon. You've done a fabulous job.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me and for thinking about me to talk you through this experience.
It's lovely to see you again, and all the best for the settling back into life in Cape Town.
Thank you.
As she takes up her new job, Leanne, just appointed as the business editor for the Africa Report, and we wish her well in that role. The last thing to remind you is, if you haven't got the wherewithal to buy a ticket or the leave to take a holiday to Belgium, you can get to have a little mini experience right here in Cape Town this coming weekend, because it is the annual Taste of Belgium Festival. It's happening at the Ambassador's Residence in Newlands this weekend, and it is an opportunity to enjoy some of the dishes Leanne's mentioned. I know there will be mule frites, there'll be carbonade, there will be chocolates, of course, there will be beers for you to taste, there's live music, waffles we didn't mention, another big delicacy you have to try, and there's also a wonderful market of artisanal craftspeople with some kind of connections to the Belgian community who will be selling their wares. So lots of things to go and taste. They sent me a sneak taster of the Biscoff cheesecake. Oh my word. If you are going, do not miss that stall is all I can say. Diets be damned. It's worth cheating for that. Just a heads up that it is on Saturday. Gates open at 10 o'clock, and we advise you to go early because it gets very, very busy. We know this from previous years. Entrance is free. You can park at a Fernwood estate or at the Stone Cottages near Kirstenbosch, and there is a free shuttle service that will drop you right at the gate to go and enjoy the event and, of course, take you back to your car at the end. So do go and enjoy Taste of Belgium this coming Saturday.